Hello YouTube, it's your favorite Sand Ninja here for another video. Today, I'm going to talk about a subject that's been on my mind a lot lately. This might surprise you and it might not, but I believe that Hidan is still alive in Boruto. Now, don't tune me out, I know this subject is discussed on Reddit almost once a week, but our Naruto, I want to hit you guys with a theory. An anime theory. So check it out. We all know Hidan got knocked by our boy Shikamaru after Hidan killed his sensei Asura, but the way he was eliminated wasn't completely efficient. Hidan is immortal, and even when his head gets separated from his body, he just has to find a way to get his head back to his body, and then he's good to go. Now, based off what we know about Hidan being able to repair himself, I think it's safe to assume that he is capable of reattaching his other limbs. Nothing stops this sadistic bastard, not even an explosion that separates his body completely. Even though Hidan is buried 6 feet down, I assure you that his return is inevitable. Yes, Reddit, I'm aware that he can't survive without nutrition, but what you guys are failing to understand is that it's just Hidan's head. How could he break down food without his stomach to put it in? Let alone still use all the muscles in his head. Now, let me explain how science would work in this mathematical explanation, but first, let's start with a fun fact. On July 17th, 1793, a woman named Charlotte Corday was executed by guillotine for the assassination of Jean-Paul Marat, a radical journalist, politician, and revolutionary. Marat was well liked for his ideas, and the mob awaiting the guillotine was eager to see Corday pay. After the blade dropped and Corday's head fell, one of the executioner's assistants picked it up, slapped it on its cheek, and according to witnesses, Corday's eyes turned to look at the man, and her face changed to an expression of indignation. Following this incident, people executed by guillotine during the revolution were asked to blink afterward, and witnesses claimed that the blinking occurred for up to 30 seconds. So, with only 30 seconds, a determined human would simply cease the ability to live, but Hidan is a special exception. For example, there is a whole episode where Hidan went without his body. A standard Naruto episode lasts about 20 minutes, and in this particular episode, we see the transition from morning when they arrive to nighttime when they are finally called back to base by pain. Now, if we do the math, 20 minutes in a Naruto episode is the equivalent of at least 12 hours. Now, Hidan was buried pretty early on in Shippuden, but what if I told you that it was not until episode 270 that Kakuzu stated that Hidan was not present amongst the reanimated army, and that he could still potentially be alive? For those that say, oh, well, maybe Kabuto didn't want to res him, or oh, maybe Kabuto couldn't find all his body parts, I will simply refer you to the fact that it was stated in Shippuden's war arc that Kabuto is able to reassemble the reanimated. Just look at how Deidara nuked himself, and still Kabuto brought him back. There's also the fact that in the non-canon story, Kabuto was able to res Hidan effortlessly. Now, let's get back on the subject. Most episodes in Shippuden show that more than one day passes, and there are a lot of days behind scenes that we just don't get to see. But for all sakes and purposes, we'll say that each Naruto episode is the equivalent of 12 hours in real life time. So, seeing as how Hidan was buried in episode 87, and was mentioned to still possibly be alive in episode 270, then this would mean that Hidan had been alive for 366 days in between those episodes. Now, for you nutrition Reddit justifiers, a normal human can live 3 weeks without nutrition, which is the equivalent of 21 days. So if we take how long Hidan had been buried alive, then we can determine that he's been alive for over 1 million times longer than any human could go without nutrition and without their body. What this means is that Hidan can also live at least 30 times longer than a normal human without his head, nutrition, or a divine intervention from Lord Joshin. Now, if we take how long it's been since the war arc, and when Boruto was introduced, then we have a total of 328 episodes that Hidan had been buried, which is at least 656 days total. In total, Hidan had been buried for roughly 1,022 days since his descent into the pit and the release of Boruto episode 98. But Meph, some of the episodes take place during the exact same time as some of the others, like the parent kid day fillers in Boruto. Yes, I'm aware, which is why I left a lot of leeway when it comes to the amount of hours that have passed in each episode. But Meph, Shikadai is 12 in Boruto, and it was confirmed that Naruto is 27 in Boruto. Yes, I'm aware. But Meth, if Naruto is 27 now and he was 17 in the war arc, then that means 10 years have passed since the war and 2 years have passed since Boruto started. Yeah? And? That means Hidan has been in the pit for 13 years! Yes! I'm aware that due to canon, Hidan has lived 13 million times longer than a normal human would without their head. But I'm also aware that the guide says Naruto is in his 30s. So we'll just stick with the average estimate. Even if we did go off those facts, Hidan would still have had an insane amount of time underground. In the current arc of Boruto, Hidan would have been decaying for 12 years. If you count the actual ages of the characters, which means his body is just about to decay completely. It is because of this reason that the ability to bring Hidan back in canon would have to happen very soon. Now, let's talk about why I think he's still alive according to the episode time theory. Hidan has lived 1,000,000 times longer than a normal human without their head. He wasn't technically killed. He was blown to bits by Shikamaru and buried while still alive, though disassembled, and even vowed to eventually pull it together. No pun intended. And get revenge on Shikamaru. On the subject of how, have you thought that maybe if Hidan can reattach his head to his body, that he can also reattach his other body parts? Now, seeing as how 1,022 days have passed, it still wouldn't be enough time for his body parts to decay. It takes an average of 8 to 12 years for human body parts to be broken down completely. It's only realistically been 2.8 years since he was buried alive, and he could easily attach the remaining bits that he can find. But how would he escape the hole? Simple. The man said it himself. He'll chew his way out. With an immortal buried, waiting for an opportunity to get loose, it's almost bound to happen at some point. And to make matters worse for those he's looking to harm, now, what if, let's say, Shikadai walked into those woods and accidentally stumbled across his head? Hidan has had years to think about his next move, and using Shikadai to get his revenge might be a smart move. As a lot of people are aware, the main characters are not all that interesting because the fans are mainly watching to see what happens to their parents. With that being said, the best thing to do in order to make these prodigies relevant is to simply eliminate those that came before them. This would help the show tremendously by giving these new characters paths of their own, and it would simply make them more interesting to watch. One way to do that is to have one plot hole and one beloved character eliminate each other. The character progression that Shikadai would gain from watching his father sacrifice himself would be extremely helpful for the show and his character progression, but more on that in the next video. If you guys like this video, make sure to drop a like, and if you want to see more of these, make sure to subscribe. And, as always, if you guys have any useful tips or anything you want to say to me personally, go ahead and put in the comments below. I'm very responsive and I'll make sure to get back to you guys. So, again, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.